Welcome in. It is the 5th of August, and Cole Jackson is currently off the screen. Now he's back right on cue. Welcome to the debut, the inaugural episode of the Ravens Collective. It is just after 8 o'clock Eastern on Tuesday, August 5th. I'm Bobby Trossett, and these are my new teammates. You guys know him, Jeff Zrebiec of The Athletic, longtime beat reporter for the Ravens and Orioles, if you go back to his Baltimore Sun days, and Canadian football guru and diehard Ravens fan, Cole Jackson. It's great to team up with you both. We will be live for the foreseeable future on Tuesday nights in this slot, 8 o'clock Eastern. We got Ravens preseason football coming up, joint practice to talk about. Jeff was out there. He's been boots on the ground, of course, for years, so we're really going to be leaning on you. But before we kind of get into the rundown and just kick this thing off, it's great to be with you guys. I look forward to this upcoming partnership.
I just thought I'd keep you boys on your toes here early. Thought I'd just shut the camera off. It's funny. I went in and typed in the chat, and I think it made me disappear. But fired up to be here, boys. Really looking forward to this. And all I'll say to the chat out there, we've been chasing down Jay-Z to do a podcast for years now. And ladies and gentlemen, we got him. Jay-Z, how's it going, brother?
Thanks, fellas. I appreciate it. I mean, I've come a long way, I think. I remember a couple of years ago, Jonas Schaefer, the Banner beat writer, he wanted to show me something on YouTube, and he came over to my cubicle at the Ravens facility, and he was kind of looking over my shoulder, and I typed in YouTube, and I actually started with a U because that's what I thought it was, YouTube. That's how I thought you got to YouTube. So I've come a long way here with the show on it, but it's a pleasure to join you guys. Looking forward to it.
Love it.
We're hoping to go a long way too, and in order to do so, our audience can help out by subscribing and just watching us, because quite honestly, we got some thresholds to hit so that we can continue to give you this kind of Tuesday night content all throughout the season and into the off season. So like the video, subscribe, help us reach that first milestone of 1,000 subscriptions and all that good stuff. All three of us obviously know each other. You've been on our show before, Jeff, and we really look forward to kind of kickstarting this. You were out. Why don't we just kind of begin this way? You were out at joint practice. It was one and done, if you will. And Nate Wiggins was almost one and done in that pile today. Inevitably, as kind of Pat Ricard teased us yesterday with during his press conference, it's very difficult to keep tempers tempered, if you will, during joint practice. It's the first time that these guys have a chance to hit somebody they won't be lining up with or on the sideline with coming up a month from now. So just to kind of kick things off, give us a feel for what it was like out at one winning drive today.
Yeah, the intensity was ratcheted up, and I think that's why coaches love the the joint practice format. It's a way to sort of control the reps and to get your players' attention, increase the intensity of everything you're doing while getting a look at a different team. Training camp gets monotonous after a while, so obviously everyone's going to talk about the fight. That people love that kind of stuff, and I've seen plenty of them. I don't know that I've been at a joint practice where I haven't seen at least one little dust up. But I think the interesting things on this one was, Nate Wiggins came sprinting off the sideline to get involved, and he winded up kind of being the lead aggressor in the whole thing. So, look, he's going to have to be smarter of that in a game. You just can't be throwing punches. And I kind of lost count after a while with how many he threw. It was not one or two. He was just kind of kept throwing right hands, even when they were kind of in a pile. So, he walked to the facility later, and thanks to Steve Bisciotti, they just put on did some renovations to their facility, and now you have this window area where you can sit and watch the rest of practice. So Nate Wiggins in full uniform pulled up a chair behind glass and from inside watched the rest of practice as he chatted with Isaiah Likely. So, they're going to want him on the field more often than not, but it would certainly added some flavor to today's practice.
Takes me back to my junior lacrosse days where you only get out there for a little bit and then you have to sit in the stands and watch the rest of it. But no, I personally loved it. I saw the Harbaugh quote where he was kind of like, take your lesson learned. And of course can't be doing that during the game. But the fact that it was Wiggins who, if you go back to all the scouting reports and all the buzz around Wiggins, and I'd say the concern around his size, the one thing I always found when I watch Wiggins play, and this even counts as rookie year, was his physicality, even though he's an undersized guy and he's slender. But I thought he played physical, and I love to see the edge coming out of a guy. Again, time and a place, and I'm glad it's happening now during a joint practice where there's actually no repercussions versus, in a game when, we don't need to be getting 15-yard flags and that sort of thing. But I kind of love it, and I loved his quote after saying, I was just looking out for my teammate, that sort of thing. Like, I love that kind of stuff. It's just my brand of football, and it's, Baltimore branded football. So, hopefully it doesn't happen where we're getting flags in meaningful moments, but I won't lie, I kind of loved it.
You mentioned that Harbaugh addressed it. This is what that sounded like.
Before, it's like we want to play it like it's a game. So here's an opportunity to handle those situations like you're going to handle them in a game. And we did 99% of the time, but we didn't on that play. And it's like Shane and I were talking afterwards, and also Chris Ballard, we were both talking. It's always special teams. It always happens in these practices on special teams. And usually it's the gunners. The gunner vice drill, you can pretty much chalk it up and predict it that it's going to happen because it's one of those full field, really competitive drills. And, it happened. But it should be a learning experience opportunity for our team, too. You don't have to throw a punch to get thrown in that game. You go back at them, they may throw you out, and the officials threw both those guys out. So that's an opportunity for us to learn from.
And as for QB1, guys?
Where are you?
I'm chilling, I know the cameras be on all of us, so I can't really do too much, but I feel like our guys handle their own. Yeah.
You didn't hear that in the beginning. It was Childs Walker asking, a fight breaks out. Where are you? And that was his response. I'm chilling, Jeff. That's probably exactly where everybody wants him to be, away from the bottom of that pile.
Yeah, no question. It was a lot of the D-backs that were involved. Jair Alexander was one of the first off the bench. Nate Wiggins got to the fracas a little bit earlier. Zay Flowers kind of got off the bench a little bit, more to kind of play peacemaker. But, it reminded me of a little of the best joint practice fight I've ever seen. And it was against Indianapolis several years ago. And it was a punt drill because that's where a lot of these special teams are where you have these guys who need to make the team and they need to make an impression. So these guys are going balls to the wall and playing every play and being physical. And somebody rushed the Ravens punter. And I don't know, I forgot the scenario why, but Albert McClellan was not happy with it. And I don't know if Albert McClellan got undercut or he felt like the guy on the Colts was taking liberty. Albert McClellan got on top of this guy and was just wailing down punches. Like he had to hit him with about 6 or 8 punches, just pummeled this poor Colts guy. It almost was so bad. If I recall correctly, McClellan was on the sideline after the play, icing his hand like a boxer. So that was probably the best joint practice fight I've ever seen. This one didn't really compare, but it got the juices flowing a little bit. That's for sure. It kind of reminded me of a baseball brawl where the benches cleared, like both sidelines kind of converged on that, where there was a pylon in the middle. And at the bottom was one of the smallest players in the Ravens throwing right hands.
Yeah, you gotta love that. I always felt bad for those guys in baseball brawls because that's a pretty far jog out from the old pitching tent out no field. But no, I love it. I absolutely love it. I remember that McClellan story. That's great. I always found it weird, like why punching someone in the helmet when you don't have I don't know. It's just not very bright. But
Albert McClellan, by the way, was always one of those guys where the teammates would say, well, the one dark alley guy you want on your side, come Albert McClellan's my guy. And then the Colts guy just messed with the wrong guy at practice, and he paid the price.
That's the perfect segue because I don't think we should be fooled by Nnamdi Madubuike's sort of playful, quiet, even keel press conference demeanor, right? I think we can all agree he gives you off that vibe during his media availabilities. And that was kind of the case today. But make no mistake about it, I think he wished he was on the right part of the field. Listen to this.
Wait, no, I didn't see exactly what happened. Do you know what happened exactly? I heard Nate was slugging somebody or something. I don't know. But it was crazy. No, I didn't. I haven't even talked to him yet. I may have to say something to him. Like, hey, bro, something happened I missed out on. I wanted to get into it, man. But, no.
Guys, there's something about, I don't know, the first time in 6+ months, like I mentioned earlier on, that you get a chance to go up against somebody you're not going to be lining up with or alongside coming up September 7th, and there's just something that comes out of these guys. And Pat Ricard, like I said, Pat Ricard kind of let us all know it is really difficult, Jeff, to kind of hold that back after such a long drought.
Oh, and these guys enjoy it. Like, I'm not saying anybody wants anybody to get hurt, but I think some of these guys thought it was hilarious, when Nate Wiggins kind of, I guess you'd call it the walk of shame, but he didn't seem ashamed when he had to walk back to the building and go in. There you see Isaiah Likely right outside the building on a chair with his leg in a boot after surgery. He was laughing his butt off and tweaking Nate Wiggins as Nate Wiggins went inside. And then Nate Wiggins pulls up a chair about 2 yards away. So, yeah, I think these guys, look, training camp is long. These days are long. It's hot. These guys get irritable. They don't want to fight their own teammates if they have to, even though sometimes tempers flare. I think they enjoyed, getting involved a little, dropping the mitts a little bit, and get involved within their team.
I'm surprised Brent Urban didn't go back to his hockey days, getting out there.
It's funny. I will not repeat this because per media regulations, we're not allowed to say overheard stuff on the sideline. But Brent Urban, when he went back to the bench, because I was standing right behind their bench. This was a special teams field. Joint practices are always tough for a reporter because you have to choose what field you want to be on. There's action everywhere, So I was watching the Ravens offense versus the Colts defense today. Our Colts reporter, James Boyd, was watching the Colts offense was Ravens defense, and the special teams was also on the field I was on. So I was like 10 yards away from it, and you could see it brewing. These special teams guys were starting to take some shots at each other. It was only a matter of time. But Brent Urban came back from the sideline and had a funny comment that I will not share because I don't want to lose my credential. But it reflected sort of his age and where he was at in his career when something like this came about.
Yet another stint for Brent. 34 years young. That makes him older by a year than his defensive coordinator. So
love the Canadians. That's all I got to say.
Don't we ever? And we are well represented in here, Jeff, aren't we?
Yeah.
Hey, before we turn a page, gentlemen, off the Nate Wiggins kind of got us started because he was the headliner off today and the brawl and everything else that ensued. But Jeff, to kind of put a bow on this, there's been some chatter that I've seen getting a little bit of traffic online that relates to maybe a general level of concern for Wiggins, being that he's been on the wrong end of some of these plays to start off summer. Now, with that said, he's got a future Hall of Famer that he's been going up against. He's got a blossoming player in Bateman that he's been going up against, a speedy Zay Flowers who's coming off his first Pro Bowl honor, and now he finds himself getting picked on, especially with A.D. Mitchell, who appeared to have a good day from the outside looking in for Indianapolis. So can you calm their nerves in terms of what you've seen so far from the second-year player?
2 points I would make to that, Bobby. One, the hardest position to play in these practices is defensive back. These drills are, a lot of these matchups and drills and the one-on-ones, they're very slanted towards the offense, and the offense has the advantage in a lot of these, these matchups. So I will say that. And two, for the first 10 days maybe of practice of Ravens availability, Nate Wiggins has been one of the most impressive players on the field. I don't really know where this is coming from other than a couple clips over the last couple of days. I will say he's had a tough go of it the last couple of days. He got beat in the stadium practice for a long one by an undrafted free agent, I believe, Guillory. And today he apparently had a hard time with A.D. Mitchell. And, he got beaten in the one-on-one drill and then in another long one that just seemed to be a really good catch and throw. I would be willing to bet if you had John Harbaugh and he was sitting across from you, asked, is Nate Wiggins one of your concerns? He would say absolutely not. Everything we've heard about Nate Wiggins for the first week plus of camp was, wow, he looks really good. We think he's going to be a really good player and have a great year from us. He's not on my list of concerns. Sure, he's a cornerback. He'll have some rough patches. He'll give stuff up. But Nate Wiggins will be just fine. It's just a total overreaction to a couple practice clips.
We're under 48 hours, Cole, from preseason play beginning. And so first of three, it's against these Colts. It's at the bank. It'll be our first look at several Ravens. We learned today unsurprisingly, based on recent trends, that the Lamars, the Derrick Henrys will not go. It's the right decision. Ask J.K. Dobbins if he thinks that's the right decision. We all remember that several summers ago. What are your thoughts going into preseason in terms of expectations on who you will see from a starting standpoint? Anything that you're looking at in particular going into Thursday night?
Yeah, my opinion on this is, I definitely agree that you have to be cautious, but I do think there is value in those reps, especially when you look at it from an offensive line perspective. Now, I will say this is a bit of a unique year because it's the continuity on this team is pretty good. Like there's not a whole lot of new faces. It's not like we're, working on a new defensive scheme like we were last year. It's not transitioning from Greg Roman into Todd Monken's offense. So that's a huge piece about this kind of 2025 team is there is a lot of continuity. And I think, those live reps are really important, but there's still, that factor of, getting guys gelling and playing at game speed, right? Even some of these stadium practices or, joint practices, they're still in practice mode, right? And when it's a preseason game, even though it's not regular season, it's still that kind of, the bright lights are on and you want them to kind of be up to full speed. So I think there's a lot of value in that, but you always have to balance it with the injury risk. And we did see that, unfortunately, with J.K. Dobbins that year. And I think that scared a lot of people. And I think that sits fresh in our head. But then you look at a guy like Isaiah Likely, right, who got hurt, in a practice, didn't have anything to do with a game. And it just kind of goes to show that these injuries can happen at any moment, anytime. Our Darius Washington's injury that, is going to impact him all year was in a conditioning drill. So, you can't be too scared of injuries because they can happen at any point. So that's kind of always been my philosophy. I'm kind of a little bit of an old school guy. I believe in those reps and I believe in how important they are for, gelling, especially again on the offensive line. I do think it matters. So, I get it game one. There's not really, I've never really seen the value in 3 or 4 preseason games. 1 or 2 makes sense to me. Probably 2 is the right balance. But I'd like to see them getting some starters and reps, especially on that offensive line unit. I don't know if they've looked at like a guy like Daniel Falele that we all want to see. And I won't lie, some of that's selfishly because I want that tape to break down, to kind of look at the, the step and the improvement. Same with Andrew Voorhees and, Roger Rosengarten in year 2, like some of those big pieces, right? But I do believe in the value of those reps. So I do want to see those guys sooner than later. And that goes for some of the rookies too. Like I want to see Mike Green. What does he look like in a live NFL environment? Because he passed all the tests at the college football level. When he played against big competition in Virginia Tech and Ohio State, it didn't look like this guy that was just dominating small schools. So now it's like, I want to see him against NFL players. So, rookies play, we know that in their history. But I do lean towards playing and, doing the kind of 1 or 2 series and then getting them out. And I think that's where you find that balance of live action versus, managing injury risk.
We've each picked 2 players to kind of look at for preseason play in terms of who we feel like might make their mark over the next month or so. We'll get to that in just a second, but a quick reset and a welcome into all of you, all 193 of you. Let's get that number north of 200. And I think the way to do that is pretty simple. Like the video on your way in, subscribe, hit that notification bell so you remember when we're going live on not a daily basis. That's the type of stuff that with the vault, that's just like, it's in my head, like it just rolls right off the tongue. We are weekly from this point forward, 8:00 Eastern, Tuesdays. We're really looking forward to it. And just know that when we hit 1,000 subscriptions at the start of the show, I think we were just over 400 out and 4,000 public watch hours. This thing gets monetized. Then the wheel really starts churning and we're in business in terms of growth and what we can provide you guys on a weekly basis. With that, which one of you wants to lead off in terms of, we should probably go, player for player for player for player for player. Each go 1 apiece. And then the second round will be our second player to watch. Jeff, you want to lead us off in terms of who you're looking for preseason player number 1?
Yeah, I mean, look, the biggest story on this team coming into spring, I still act like I cover baseball. It is spring training. The biggest story coming into this, training camp is the kicking situation. Who's going to replace Justin Tucker, and is Tyler Loop good enough to be that guy? So far, so good for Loop. Had a 6-for-6 day today. I made another one from well over 50 yards that looked like it would have been good for 60 plus. He's kicking the ball really well. He had one bad day. Otherwise, he's had a really good training camp, enough where they felt comfortable to waive John Hoyland and they haven't essentially given the job to Loop, but it's there for the taking. And, he's going to be a story. We're going to watch every kick. He's obviously a talented kid, but you really don't know until he gets into some of these situations in games. And we all know how this works. As good as he's looked, one missed kick in a preseason game, and suddenly people are all, hey, maybe we should bring in somebody else. So Tyler Loop does not have any competition right now, but that could change really quickly with a rough night Thursday. So he's certainly a guy to watch, but man, the kid seems to like the bright lights and the spotlight. And, there's nothing that suggests he won't go out there and, not consistently knock the ball through the uprights.
Cole, who are you looking at to start? I'd have to think it's got to be in the trenches to begin, but you let us know.
Why wouldn't it be? Carson Vincent. This is a guy that, going back to what I said earlier about getting these O-line guys snaps, Ronnie Stanley's an established veteran. His snaps are going to be managed. We know that. So this gives a guy like Carson Vincent, who's coming in as, one of the rawest rookies that the Ravens have drafted in the last few years. This was a guy from a small school that we saw some of that rawness. You go back and watch the Senior Bowl and you see some of the struggles, but then you go day 1 to day 2 to day 3. And the amount of growth that I saw from that kid in 3 days is just what gets me so excited about getting him NFL level coaching. And so now we get to see him probably playing some pretty consistent snaps in the preseason. So we're going to get to see him out there against NFL caliber talent. Again, I think he's going to play a lot because there's just not a big need to play Ronnie Stanley, going back to, kind of what Harbaugh said today. So Carson Vincent is a guy that, I'll be quite frank with you guys, like I'm expecting him to have some struggles early. You go back to a guy like Roger Rosengarten, who was a lot more polished, a lot more pro ready. And even we saw his struggles, and it took a few weeks, of that coaching and that kind of reflection and getting in the film room with the coaches and then working on some of those challenges. It's going to be like that with Carson Vincent, but this kid's tools are, the length, the strength, the athleticism. He checks every single box that you want in a left tackle, comes into a perfect situation where he has all that raw talent that you want to take a chance on him, but you probably don't want him to play right away. That's why they brought Noteboom in, right? They wanted to have that swing tackle in case something happens early, and they don't want to have to throw this kid to the wolves. But getting into the preseason and, getting to see these live snaps, so much value there. And I can't wait to just see, what it looked like compared to his college game. How is he playing with his hands? Is he squaring up, or is he still turning that back foot in too early? All that stuff that we broke down over on my channel when we drafted him. Can't wait to see that, but I'm really, really excited to just see that kind of game 1 to game 2 to game 3 comparison. So that's my guy. I think he's going to really impress people with his progress, even if game 1 comes out looking a little sloppy, but just really excited for this kid to have some NFL caliber coaching.
And gets George Warhop after really a tumultuous season. He gets to kind of get a fresh start. And of course, rest in peace to Joe D'Alessandris. That's the whole reason why last year was so up and down and so last minute when it comes to, fortifying that staff. And here he is, the guy that you speak of, Carson Vincent, 6'7", 314, a 5th rounder out of Alabama A&M. Guys, I'm going to go with somebody that I think we learned a lot about last year during preseason play, and that was 7th round pick out of Purdue, Sanusi Kane. I mean, this dude pops in special teams, got good vision, athletic as heck, feels like a Raven in terms of the tenacity and with which he plays. And I'm not bringing him up to say, like, I don't have confidence in Malachi Starks in wake of our Darius Washington setback, which we all know it's going to take a miracle to get him back before the postseason, you would think. I mean, I know they're saying December. That's a very optimistic timetable on that. Right, yeah. Jeff? December is
Oh yeah, I would. Yeah, I mean, look, if he comes back this year, it's a win. I mean, look, the guy's a pending free agent too. If you're him, do you want to come back in the playoff hunt in December and potentially put out bad tape where it could affect your money for the offseason? So yeah, that kid, he was out there today, like actually watching practice, and it was good to see him. But yeah, I would, anything they get from this year, it would be wow. That would be really impressive.
And like Cole alluded to earlier on, the fact that it happened in a conditioning session coming off a breakout season where he really bailed this team out in a lot of ways alongside Kyle on the back end when he was moved back to, traditional safety. Your heart breaks for the guy. But needless to say, what Sanusi put on tape last year, what you saw him do in the regular season, albeit a small sample size with some special teams that flashed, I'm excited to see if he can make a play for at least a rotational opportunity here and there. And gosh, knock on wood, if injuries come into play, maybe he knocks on the door. So that's my player one. Let's swing it back around. I believe we began with Jeff. So you're player number 2 for preseason.
Yeah, real quick, guys. Cole, in Vincent, I think the only real jobs that seem to be available now are on the reserve offensive line. I think that's the most fascinating position battle left. I mean, assuming Voorhees starts at left guard, you have your 5, Noteboom and Cleveland are 7. They usually like to keep 10. Where are those 3 guys coming from if Emory Jones isn't one of those guys? And at every day that passes without Emory Jones being on the football field, it makes it less likely he's going to be on their week 1 roster. So I agree there. Good call. The biggest name on the bubble to me is David Ojabo, entering his walk year, so to speak. The former second-round pick who's never been healthy really, or he's only been healthy in flashes. I think there's a sense that there's no job for him and he's probably gone. And I think that's premature. I think there are scenarios where they'll take 6 outside linebackers. It's going to leave him short somewhere else, and probably 2 of them are going to be scratches during the week. But I don't think it's impossible. This team just isn't in the business in giving away young pass rushers who they think may have talent. We all know how much Eric DaCosta abhors giving up on early draft picks early. So I think he has a puncher's chance here to make this team. And he looks the part. He looks like he's in really good shape. He has some, I didn't see much from him today. He almost actually got in a scuffle, but in practices early, he's been very active. He's made some plays. He's had some sacks. And right now we know it's just not, it's not an apt comparison because a lot of factors go into it. But right now, if you're grading by just who's looked like the better player, the more impactful, the more explosive player, Ojabo's looked better than Adisa Isaac through the first couple of weeks of camp, and I don't even think it's been particularly close. However, we all know that Isaac is a second-year player. He basically lost his whole rookie year to injuries, and I can't see them moving on from him right now. But I'm just saying, like, if that was the comparison, if that was a true competition for their 5th outside linebacker job, I would have to say Ojabo has been the better, more explosive player in training camp. So he needs to be dynamite in this preseason, and he should. You're talking about he's probably going to go against second and third string offensive tackles who may not be in the NFL in a month from now. And, with his pedigree, with his athletic skill set, he really should dominate or at least consistently find ways to be noticeable and make an impact. I mean, he's a talented guy. And look, I think you look at it 2 ways. He could either force his way onto the team by playing like that, or other teams will be watching David Ojabo because everyone's looking for young pass rushers. And if he looks really good and if he flashes, maybe they can recoup a draft pick in a late summer trade. So I think he's definitely a guy to watch.
Yeah, and I think I'm up here next. And, I just want to reflect on Ojabo quickly before I go into my next guy. But, with a guy like Ojabo, I just think the coaches, especially here in Baltimore, where he's been here, they want to believe in him because of his draft pedigree. I think the type of athleticism he has, they're not going to want to let go of that. It kind of reminds me and I talked about this a lot with Brandon Stevens, a lot of the fan frustration around the type of player he is, but with his play style and his athleticism and, the fact that he was so close on so many plays, I think kept coaches enamored with him because, when he was losing, it wasn't necessarily getting burnt, right? It was, he's right in position, he's in stride, but his head's not around to the ball. And that is got to be like, a coach is just going to look at that and be like, if I can just fix that. And I can tell you right now, if a guy like Chuck Smith, who, I think you give Chuck Smith a ball of clay and he could probably turn it into a guy that could get after the quarterback. He's going to be enamored with Ojabo if he's healthy and has that type of athleticism. So I think that makes a ton of sense. And I will say, and I don't want to crap on the kid because, he's just, we haven't really gotten to see a ton, but, a guy like Adisa Isaac just hasn't really shown anything, right? And it's like, he hasn't even kind of shown that type of upside. We at least have some of that from Ojabo. Where, he's had a couple plays where you're like, okay, there's that guy they thought they were getting, right? And then moving into my second guy, I'm going to call an audible on myself. So I was going to talk about Keandre Jackson, and really what I wanted, and I mean, I could talk about any rookie because, like, I'm very excited to see a guy like Anise Peebles. Jay-Z, I don't know if this guy has been a soundbite. I don't know if he's talked enough in camp, but I just think he's got a hell of a personality, and
he's a character,
he's just going to be so funny, and he's a rookie. He's going to be a little quiet now, but I think when you get the chance, I think that kid's going to be just a fan favorite. Everyone's going to love him. So I am excited to see him for sure, but I'm really focused on, okay, where is the opportunity? Because as Jeff mentioned with the offensive line, I'd say there's not a lot of position battles across this team right now. Like, I think 53-man predictions plus or minus one or two guys, I think are, barring injury, I think it's pretty straightforward. Like, this is one of those rosters where it feels pretty set. But one of the spots where I do think there will be a battle, and I do think there'll be a fifth guy that's picked, is that safety position, because we know they want to try and have that flexibility to move Kyle Hamilton around and have that kind of single high safety. So I was going to talk about Keandre Jackson because he plays in the box really well, and I think is going to be able to make an impact the way that Bo Braid did last year, where, it's in the second, third quarter of these preseason games and he makes plays. I think he's that type of guy, but I don't think he necessarily fits what they're going to be looking for in having a guy that could potentially take some of those Ardarius Washington snaps. So who is that guy? I wonder if it might be Reuben Lowery, a guy that's out of a small school like Chattanooga. So undersized guy, but 5'9", 204. He just feels like, Jay-Z, tell me if that just doesn't sound like a classic Ravens UDFA that actually factors into playing time.
Dude, the kid's an engineering major in college, smart dude. I mean, I don't even know if he's a dark horse anymore because he's gotten a good amount of ink. But yeah, he certainly played his way onto the bubble if he wasn't on there before. And you can never underestimate how important that UDFA streak is. Now, I know the streak broke of keeping one on the regular season roster a couple years ago. I think it was the COVID year. But I think it's 20 to the last 21 years that they've kept the UDFA on the season opening roster. That is important to them. That means a lot to them. It means a lot to the scouts that find these kids. So I'd never underestimate it. I wasn't on that defensive field, but I talked to someone who was, and one of the names they mentioned today was Reuben Lowery. And, you watch him in preseason, people know the Ravens can find these guys. So if he flashes, he may not be a guy you can hide in the practice squad. You may have to find a spot for him.
That's just it. And a guy that I think if you look at their depth chart, I think he's factoring into that slot corner spot, but I know he played when he was at Chattanooga. He also played some safety. So, that overhang role that they like to use, I could definitely see him not only factoring into the 53-man roster, but potentially carving out a playing role this year, just because of the skill set. And I think Bo Braid has that skill set as well. And I think if anybody follows my stuff, I was the biggest Bo Braid fan last year. I'm really excited to see him this year and see what he can do, especially with this opportunity opening up. But just Reuben Lowery, just strikes me as that guy that just seems like a typical Ravens UDFA that, can make an impact. I think he's also plays with a lot of toughness that, he could actually factor into special teams as well, which they we know they covet that in those last 5-6 roster spots. You especially to be active on game day, you got to be able to play special teams. So I'll be really interested to kind of keep my eye on him and also take a look at some of those. Yeah. And I would encourage you guys that are watching games, watch who's on the special teams unit, watch who the gunners are. Those are little cheat codes. If you guys want to enter that 53-man roster prediction competition that I think the Ravens run on their website, focus in on that, because I think it's a little bit of a tell in terms of who's going to make this roster.
I'll give you my second player in just a second, but as we continue to kind of debut our first show here, I think it's probably wise to reset and welcome all of you into the first ever episode, our debut episode here inside the Ravens Collective YouTube channel. It's 8:00 Eastern on Tuesdays moving forward. Cole Jackson's here, Jeff Zarebek's here, and I'm Bobby Trossett, of course. We're pleased to be in this new format. And I will say, if you have super chats, we'll squeeze in some time. We'll try to, at least, at the end. So go ahead and throw those in accordingly if you so choose. And in order to get us across the finish line to where we can kind of get to a point where we can monetize this channel, and then it's wheels up from there, things like liking the video, subscribing to the channel. We got to hit 1,000 subscriptions. That's our first threshold. And then after that, hitting that notification bell, sharing it with like-minded Ravens fans, group chats, Facebook groups that you guys are a part of, Discords, all the good stuff that helps this thing go. So appreciate you guys for being here. And without further ado, before we get on to our next topic, I'm going to go with Teddye Buchanan. And maybe it's because Sarah and I had the privilege of having him on earlier this offseason and he kind of won us over. But I also watched a little bit of his tape. I listened to the guy, and I also know that Trenton's left the door open, or at least he did last year. Jeff, I'll have to lean on you in terms of what he's looked like so far this summer. But when I look at Teddye Buchanan, I see a player that is high IQ. I see a durable player. I see an extremely experienced player with a lot of reps under his belt, a lot of productivity in college. Guy understood what it meant to kind of transfer and successfully transfer and then finish in Cal, where he wanted to spend, like, he grew up idolizing college football players at Cal. And then he has an opportunity to finish his career there. He balls out. He gets on the Ravens radar. Obviously, we know what they have in Roquan Smith, a perennial all-pro, who's seen some noise. He's heard some noise this offseason about his conditioning, about his physique. We all saw, I think it was through Jeremy Fowler's piece, the anonymous NFL exec that referred to him as sluggish at times last year. You think that doesn't mean anything to that guy? The pride, the heart that he wears on his sleeve. So I'm expecting a big bounce back year for him. And ultimately, whoever's alongside him, much like it's like life playing with Kyle Hamilton, what a luxury. What a luxury to play alongside Roquan. What a luxury to play alongside Kyle. And whoever ends up winning that job, particularly if it's a young player like Teddye, I think he pays dividends to be alongside a guy like that. So Teddye Buchanan is somebody I'm going to be watching over the course of the next few weeks.
Yeah, man. It doesn't take much to get me to feel sorry about my physique, but you look at that guy and he looks like he's sculpted out of a piece of granite. I mean, that guy has muscles where you shouldn't have muscles, and he's been impressive. He plays fast, but Cole, also what you were saying, it's so right about the special teams, and that's we could break down this roster all you want, but the reality is the last 2 or 3 spots are going to be earmarked for special teams players. It doesn't matter what position these guys play. They're special teams players. So if Chris Horton comes to Harbaugh and says, I want this guy, those guys are getting roster spots, whether they play wide receiver, inside linebacker, safety. And yeah, it's worth watching who's on that first kickoff team these games. I remember, I think it was 2014. I was covering a preseason game in Dallas, and I just happened to look out there an opening kickoff. I think it was the 3rd preseason game back then. And who was out there but a linebacker who's wearing number 54? And I'm like, wait a second, Zach Orr? Who's that? Like, why is he on a first-team kickoff? Well, sure enough, that guy made the football team that year because he was a damn good special teams player, and then he became a second-team All-Pro. So it is very much worth watching who is getting those frontline special teams reps. It matters. This is a team that lost Chris Ford. lost Malik Harrison. They lost some special teams talent. So they need to fill in those roles with younger players. So those guys have a shot. Their shot is on special teams rather than, even being top reserves at different positions.
Cole, let's shift gears here, and I want to tee you up accordingly. We can all kind of respond as we see fit or come up with other topics along the lines of what I'm about to ask you, and that is, what's something that's come across as hyperbolic to you, whether it's within the fan base, whether it's dialogue that you've seen across your channel, perhaps something that's too premature in your mind? What is it, and why is it bothering you? Because clearly in our document, something's on your mind.
Do I need to talk about my twin? No, I'm going to skip Mark Andrews and the discourse around Mark Andrews right now. And I'm going to focus on what I think is the biggest hyperbole right now. And today was a great example. I saw at the end of all these joint practices, I get the biggest kick out of it, because you'll read one guy's report, and I follow a bunch of Colts guys, and then I'll read their reports, and it's like, they don't match. Nobody's talking, like, everybody's saying their guys won, our guys won. And, my biggest overreaction every year is the reaction to one-on-ones, the reaction to who won this practice. And, Jeff, you kind of touched on it at the start.
Yeah.
This offense always sucks in training camp.
Yeah.
Like, it's just one of those things where, and then you have to kind of play mental gymnastics. It's like, okay, is that because the defense is really good, or is that because the offense is really bad? And, today was the offensive line. I read that, Lamar Jackson had to ground 2 to 3 balls, and he finished 5 for 9. And of the 4 incompletions, 2 or 3 were throwaways. And so everyone's freaking out about the offensive line. And I'm doing it too, right? And I'm making fun of Daniel Falele because that's part of my shtick. So I'm guilty as charged too. But then I start reading on, and it's like, okay, well, it sounds like, there's nowhere to throw the ball. And, one of these sacks was a coverage sack. And, then it's just one of those things where I've tried to prevent myself from getting too hot and bothered by practice reports. And it's not that they're not important. Of course they are. But it's just, guys will have off days. Guys will have, big, like you'll get a guy like Keith Kirkwood who's just going to make an over-the-shoulder catch on Jar Alexander and look like prime Randy Moss out there, right? And, is that what we're going to expect to come preseason or come regular season? Probably not. But I just find every year it's always the offense too. And it's always this freak out that we have. And then week 1 comes around and Lamar puts up a Jackson 5 and suddenly everything's good again.
Yeah. The question who won practice is stupid. That's just stupid. I mean, you got to understand, like, all
this segment was made for Jay-Z.
Yeah, God. What did it take 45 minutes to go on my first tangent? Like, people, you just got to realize people have different motivations for coming to practice. Some guys are going balls out and have to make the football team or going 100 miles an hour. Other guys are working on a specific skill set or working on different things or working at a different position. Then you have the guys who are just coasting, hoping to hell that they don't get hurt in this practice. So, I mean, it's always tough to measure the different motivations, what teams are working on. What's the focus? What's the motivation level for different guys? I'll tell you this. Who do you think was going to be more motivated for today's practice? Daniel Jones and Anthony Richardson, who are trying to win a damn starting quarterback job, or Lamar Jackson, who's trying to get to September 7th in Buffalo, feeling as good as possibly can? He doesn't care. Like, I'm not saying he doesn't care about having good practice, but, these guys, this is it for them. This is a huge week for Daniel Jones, Anthony Richardson. Lamar, he's just chilling, as he said earlier on that earlier clip, right. So yeah, it's just the practice declarations about who won. I once watched a joint practice where a Carolina Panthers team, which may have only won 1 or 2 games and was quarterbacked by Sam Darnold at the time, absolutely had to intercept Lamar Jackson 5 or 6 times that practice. It was embarrassing. They were hooting and hollering. It might as well have been the Super Bowl for him. But you know what? When the season started, the Ravens were really good and the Carolina Panthers stunk. It just doesn't matter that much. I know people love to talk about it. It's great for guys like me. People want to ask me those questions, but Cole's right. I mean, you want to see your team getting better. You want to see your team progressing and working on different things. most of all, you want to see your team get in that locker room at the end of practice with everybody feeling good and ready to practice the next day so they're not injured. So all things considered, I think that was, it was a step forward for the Ravens today, regardless of who won the practice.
I think one thing you hit on that I want to go back to is we underestimate when someone might be trying something like a different technique, right? And it reminds me of that clip that went viral, and it was a Mike Green clip at the Senior Bowl, him running through Josh Connerly. So like as a Ravens fan, I love that clip. I'll watch it every morning when I wake up because I want to see that all year. But I remember reading this tweet from Brandon Thorne, who was there in mobile, and Thorne's a big O-line guy, and so he's watching the interactions between the O-line and the coaches. And I guess what had happened is the coach made the offensive line coach that was working with Josh Connerly made him try a different stance in that rep. And then Mike Green literally ran right through his face. But we underestimate what these guys are being asked to do, why they're being asked to do it. A lot of it's, especially with offensive linemen. I remember reading about them trying to fix Ben Cleveland's stance because the guy hadn't done yoga in his life and couldn't bend over. So they were trying to change his stance in his rookie year, and he really struggled because it was so different for him. So you just got to keep that kind of context in mind when you're going through some of this.
Who's to say that wasn't going on when Randy Brown had his first opportunity to kind of work closely during OTAs and mandatory minicamp with Tyler? Right? It. I mean, pre-pads, that might have been going on. That's when we all know kind of he was scuffling in, and now it's been, knock on wood, pretty darn consistent since the pads have come on and bullets are starting to fly. Jeff, did you have a separate one, or were you piggybacking off of Cole in terms of
piggybacking on all these?
Well, I mean, real quick, I'll try to make this quick, but this woe is me attitude every time a Ravens gets an injury. I mean, I just think it's tired and it's got to stop, really. I mean, I think people so much scar tissue from 2021 when they had 23 guys or whatever it was on IR, and I think there was at one stretch there's like 5 key players to go down with season-ending injuries in a 12-day span. And I mean, you had Dobbins and you had Justice Hill and you had Gus Edwards, you had Marcus Peters. So I get it. I mean, nobody likes to get injured. No one likes when their team gets injured. But every camp injury, is not a reason to throw in the towel for the season and say the Ravens are doomed. I mean, this team, knock on wood, and I knocked my computer aside, but knock on wood, this team has had really good health luck over the last couple of years. They've been one of the healthiest teams in football. They know what they're doing. They work hard to take care of their players and evolve their medical department every year. I always get, every time a guy goes down, we can't have nice things. Well, yeah, you have one of the best rosters in football. I think that's pretty nice. I mean, would you like to have the Browns roster at this point? I think, I think there's plenty nice right now about the Ravens, and guys are going to get hurt. Like a lot of times somebody on Twitter will ask me, well, how did this happen? And I'll just say it happened playing football. Guys get hurt playing football, whether they're practicing or in games. There's going to be injuries. It's a physical sport. A lot is asked of these guys physically, and there's injuries that happen. So you just hope for the best. You hold your breath, especially through some of these practices, that they get by healthy, and you don't overreact every time somebody misses a couple practices for something that may not be that serious.
You guys want to know what I think's tired?
Us arguing?
No, I'm here for that. I'm sure that stick is going to be built up here.
Please tell me it's late round wide receiver hype, because that was my next one that I was going to go to.
Well, you got one part of it right, and it's the wide receiver position. And year after year, and this might be low-hanging fruit, but year after year, there's this mesmerized state a certain percentage of the fan base gets into with that position. And while I think very highly of a Devontae Walker, I do think the right word for this is premature. And it's 1, because of what they currently have in the room, and 2, where he's at as a player. I can remember very similar hype the first half of last summer's training camp. You can check my work on that, Jeff, if you have anything in the memory bank on it last year for Devontae. The first half of the year, he's inactive a lot. You're hearing kind of like, is he ready? Does he need to develop more? Then he starts earning his keep on special teams. He's got the highlight toe drag touchdown against the Giants, which is fantastic. The dude can run with anybody. Wasn't it a 4.28 or something like that? Wiggins was a 4.2, or am I thinking 4.3 for Tez? Wiggins was a 4.28, right? And I believe Tez was anyway. The guy can move.
Yeah,
I think he's in the 4.3. Yeah, okay. Yeah. I think he's somewhere in that range, 4.3 range. And so I think it's a little bit hyperbolic to sit here and think that he's going to have a big role when you've got the big three, if you ask Todd Monken, in Zay, Bateman, and DeAndre. And we haven't even mentioned the likes of big play Tylan Wallace, who continues to earn his keep, albeit a small sample size. So I guess in order to really summarize this, I think 2026-27 Devontae would earn that kind of hype this time of year and maybe even live up to that hype in those seasons. And now he's got a chance this year, much like Zay did under the tutelage of Odell a couple years ago, to learn from a future Hall of Famer, to develop in this system, to make his 53-man roster spot, and then become, a coveted player for them, continue his special teams consistency. And so mine would be Devontae Walker.
Yeah, me saying this, I'll probably get like stoned in the town square. But if you're asking me now on August 5th, I'm going to tell you that my prediction would be Devontae Walker is a healthy scratch in week 1. Fans are going to blow their minds, but it's the reality. Like, I don't think he's established as a core special teams guy yet. Tylan Wallace is. Tylan Wallace is also a really physical blocker on the perimeter. He does that. As I said, he can return punts. He may be the punt returner. We don't know that yet. I think Wester's got the edge there, but Wallace is an insurance policy. So he does a lot more for the Ravens right now. No, he doesn't have that dynamic big play ability, but you have to look at how all the pieces come together. He can be much improved and still yet to be a part of the Ravens offense, at least the frontline part. So, I think it is better to proceed with caution when you're talking about him. I mean, I think it's going to take an injury probably ahead of him to be a key piece on offense, at least earlier in the season.
Again, it comes down to what's that path to get there. I can't help but agree. I can't help but agree with you because you got your 6 wide. This is what I mean with this roster. Our 6 wide receivers that they usually keep, they're pretty set. You got Zay, Bateman, Nuke. You got Walker, Wallace, Wester. I don't think that's earth-shattering. I think that's this is a pretty easy.
The question is if they take the 6th and Wester, but right now I think Wester will get every opportunity to win that punt return job and be that guy. But that's the question. I don't think there's any question about the first 5.
That's it. And so then it comes down to game day. There's always one wide receiver scratch. Like if you go back through historical inactives, it's always a receiver. So it comes down to what role are Wallace and Wester and Walker as the 3 backups. You got your XZ slot backup. What role are they playing on game day? Well, Wallace is going to be a special teamer regardless of if he's a returner. So he's going to be active. There's no question about that. Wester is really where it comes down to. So it's whether or not Wester is the punt returner or if it's Wallace, because if Wester's not the punt returner, then there might be a discussion between Wester and Walker. So and again, it goes back to what we talked about earlier, special teams. I know people hate talking about special teams, and I've made this my shtick for like 10 years now because I just know it matters. And this isn't just a Ravens thing. I know a lot of people say John Harbaugh's special teams background. As you guys can tell, I'm very passionate about this. Every team does this. Like special teams matter. It's 1/3 of the damn game. You have to be prepared for it. So it's weird to think, but Devontae Walker being active on game day when healthy, when the core is healthy, is going to be dependent on whether or not Wester won the punt return battle, as weird as it sounds.
You guys know there will be a wide receiver who pops in training camp and the preseason, and people flip out about we got to have we found the next Puka Nacua. You got to make the team. There will be one. It's just a matter of who it is. Xavier Guillory, come on down, or Dayton Wade. Dayton Wade looks really good, by the way. But that's beside the point. There will be a guy. You just just know it. We're not done with this receiver conversation. It's an annual right of the summer for all of us.
I started getting tagged in Keith Kirkwood posts asking if I could go back and watch the film. I was like,
Keith Kirkwood, frontline special teams player today, guys. I hate to break the news to you.
like that.
Hey,
why
do I feel like the noisiest player that you're referencing right now in recent summers was Shamar Bridges? Why does he feel like he's been the
You
noisiest?
guys know where Shamar Bridges is killing it right now? It's up here in Canada.
Yeah,
The guy was like top 10 in receiving yards in the
great
CFL
kid,
last
man.
year.
What a great kid he was. You know, just could never stay healthy here. And you could go on and on, Bobby. Jeremy Butler, remember him? Touchdown Tommy Streeter. I mean, there's one every year that people get excited about.
That's the beauty of it.
Marlon Brown, those long locks.
Hey, yeah.
Blessing and a curse. Hey, let's do a couple things here. One, kind of reset. We're going to do a quick little last minute, 5-minute topic on Isaiah Likely and get Jeff's thoughts on the timeline and where things stand. And we'll set it up with a Todd Monken clip from his press conference this week. But I just refreshed, more importantly, for this channel's sake, I just refreshed where we're at in terms of subscriptions. This is our first episode, as you guys probably have gathered by now. We're Tuesdays at 8 p.m. Eastern for this point forward. And right now, we are 254 subscriptions out from 1,000. So good early milestone for us. Monetization is in sight. And we thank you guys for being here tonight. There's over 180 of you at the moment. At peak, there's been over 200. We hope to continue to send those numbers through the moon over the next few weeks leading into the season. And the ways that you can help us out until we reach a couple of those goals is simply liking the video, subscribing, hitting that notification bell, and spreading awareness through word of mouth, group message, Facebook group, Discord server, everything in between. All right, why don't we set things up this way? I went ahead and clipped Todd Monken speaking about potential 3 wide receiver sets, not coming to Baltimore. There's been plenty of them since he arrived, but having more of them. Here he is with, of course, the emergence and what prompted the question of DeAndre Hopkins.
That remains to be seen. We're still early in the process. I like what I've seen so far from our guys. As I said in the spring, I see him as a starter. I see us having 3 starters. But I also see Charlie Kolar as a starter. I see Isaiah Likely as a starter. I think we could go 2 backs. I think we could have Derek out there and Justice, or Derek and Keaton. I think that's pretty cool. You know, that kind of versatility. So I see all those guys as starters. But you're right. I think we could end up going that direction. But that remains to be seen as we play it out.
All right, Jeff, why don't we start with you? One, what's your gut telling you about Isaiah's timeline? He tweeted out, I think at the end of last week, that or kind of led us to believe that he came out on the other side in good shape after the foot fracture. So that's one. And then 2, formation-wise, personnel-wise, given the emergence of, not the emergence, Charlie Kolar's been around. And if you go back and look at his Iowa State statistics, which I had to go refresh myself on today after he started balling out at joint practice, this dude's not a blocking tight end. That's secondary for him. He's a playmaker, and he's shown that from some small sample sizes, given that he's been in arguably the deepest tight end room in the entire league since they drafted him in the 4th round back in 22. So Todd Monken's sort of strategy over the next 2 months and Isaiah's timeline in your mind.
Well, one, I was disappointed they cut off that Monken clip. We needed a little lower shot to see the play sheet and the draws. I know that's Cole's thing. I was a little disappointed there. But yeah, I think I would be surprised if Isaiah Likely's on the field in week 1 in Buffalo. I mean, look, foot injuries, foot fractures, guy who depends a lot on speed and athleticism. Those are tough injuries. So I think if they get him by mid-September, that would be a win for the Ravens. So that's what I have to say about that. I never, Isaiah Likely's been a very durable guy, so I wouldn't count him out on anything. But I just think if more realistically, when is he going to – it's not just when he's on the field, it's when he's closer to 100% and that he's not limited by that foot. And that's going to be a while. What they can do, look, you're going to need to get Hopkins involved and the three receiver, the two backs and Hill and Mitchell on this field at the same time, or Henry, that's exciting. And that would be cool to see some of those looks. But, I would have to think we're going to see a lot of three wide receiver sets, or I should say more than we've seen in the recent past from the, Ravens. And look, you got a future Hall of Fame receiver sitting there. And I think early in the season, I think you have to try to establish him. I mean, you can lose these guys early if they don't think they're involved and they're not getting touches. So I think, you never want Isaiah Likely to be injured. You never want him to be injured, but I think the silver lining of that is it gives you an opportunity to get DeAndre Hopkins more involved and on the field early.
Cool.
I think these are Todd Monken must just go home and sit in his rocking chair, playbook in his drawers, and just smile. Because for an offensive coordinator to have this many tools in his toolbox, he can go heavy with a Patrick Ricard and a Charlie Kohler. He can go light with a guy like Nuke that's your third wide receiver. The Ravens can go with a 2 running back set. They can run a triple option with Derrick Henry as an option and Keaton Mitchell as a pitch option. They're not going to do it a lot, but those are things like the Heisman package, right? It was fun to see, and they could do some great things like that. That's the type of stuff that's in there. I'd love to see them come out with that full house that they used to run under Greg Roman, and get Ricard out there with Charlie Kohler and Derrick Henry, because good luck hitting that. So there's just so many different things that Todd Monken can do. And that's how I like to look at this. Sometimes it seems like a burden, right? How do we get everyone their touches and targets? And I've said it for years. Ravens players are annoying to own in fantasy football because it's never just one guy. They're never going to force feed targets. It's always kind of spread around, and that's going to be no different this year. And I think it also gives them a good opportunity. A couple of these players being older, guys like DeAndre Hopkins, you want him to last, all the way till February. So, being able to manage his snaps and get him impactful touches. But one thing I'll say about Charlie Kohler, I almost mentioned him at the start when we were talking about 2 players, but what an opportunity for this kid. He has come in, I would say, in a tough spot. Likely took off before him. It happens every time they draft 2 tight ends. It's got to be studied. They always draft 2 tight ends, and the second one always takes off. But the Ravens have such a history, and someone in the chat mentioned it, especially where they've been able to develop these blocking skills and receiving guys. You saw a guy like Josh Oliver, who is known as being, almost like a slot receiver turned tight end. And he became a premier blocking tight end. It's absurd. And they kind of did the same thing with Charlie Kohler. And I just think, what an opportunity for this kid. No rush getting Likely back. Let him get healthy. We know those foot injuries can linger. Kohler can hold it down, and they can still keep that 2 tight end receiving upside, and you get Kohler some looks in some of that. So I just think it's very exciting for Todd Monken to have all these tools at his disposal. And I think what he can scheme up, I would say, if you guys were to ask the question, who has the most pressure on him going into this year, a lot of people would look at Lamar. A lot of people would look at 89, Mark Andrews. A lot of people would look at Falele. I look at Todd Monken. I think there's a lot of pressure there because of how much firepower is at his disposal. And it's up to him to, command the orchestra and, be whatever you call that little dude that kind of, does that. I don't know what that dude's called. Conductor. So it's up to him to go up there and kind of get it done. So
don't they have those in Canada, Cole? Come on.
My wife tried to take me to one of those shows, and I was watching O-line highlights in the back.
Yeah, of course you were. Of course you were. That sounds like a great place to stick a pin in it, gentlemen. And one show officially in the books. We capped out at over 200 peak concurrent viewers on episode number 1. So great start. And for those of you who haven't caught on yet, it's Tuesdays, 8 o'clock Eastern. From this point forward, it's the Ravens Collective. It's myself, it's Cole, it's Jeff. And we really look forward to kind of getting this thing off the ground. So on your way out, if you could please like the video, subscribe if you haven't already done so. I'll give you one more refresh to see where we're finishing the show at, and that'll give us a little bit of a benchmark over the next. Okay, 715. So we increased by, I think, like 10 or 11 since we last updated it. So 715 subscriptions. When we hit 1,000, and we hit a 4,000 watch hours, we can really start to kind of move this thing. So, gentlemen, anything from you on the way out?
Stay healthy.
Stop making a big deal about minor injuries.
Hey, and that health wish is for this trio as well, right?
Yeah,
So,
that's for sure.
Look forward
My
to
back's
it.
sore.
Hey, in the meantime, though, over the next 6 days, you can find Jeff's work at The Athletic and also on Twitter or X. Cole can be found on YouTube. Road Graders is the channel, or you can go on X as well. I can be found daily, 12 noon Eastern, with Sarah Ellison on The Vault, YouTube, Twitter, and everything else. So appreciate you guys. Thanks for a great start. Thanks for a solid debut. And the three of us will be back in your living rooms, on the treadmills, wherever you've been watching us, coming up under a week from now, right here inside the Ravens